Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to get into something that I think we all struggle with more often than we realize, and that is the power of words. Specifically, we are talking about expanding your English vocabulary.
Okay.
We have a great source for this deep dive. It is a podcast episode
Okay.
that is all about practical vocabulary building tips,
Cool.
and it's packed with insights that'll have you looking at words in a whole new way.
It's interesting you say struggle, because I think that captures the feeling perfectly.
Right.
Many people see vocabulary building as a chore,
Right.
but it can be so much more rewarding if we approach it strategically.
It's like the difference between struggling to open a jar
Right.
with your bare hands versus using the right tool to pop it open effortlessly.
Yeah.
And our Source podcast really dives into those tools.
Right.
And one that stood out to me was this concept of the 3 C's for vocabulary building.
Okay.
Can you unpack that for us?
Absolutely. The 3 C's are about moving beyond rote memorization and really integrating new words into your understanding of the language.
Okay.
They stand for context, consistency, and curiosity. Let's start with context.
Sure.
Have you ever learned a word from a dictionary?
Oh, yeah.
Felt proud of yourself and then completely blanked on how to use it in a real conversation?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
It's like having a shiny new tool in your toolbox, but not knowing which screw it's meant for.
Right.
So how does context solve this?
Think about learning a new word by hearing it used in a conversation between friends
Okay.
versus reading it on a vocabulary list.
Right.
In a conversation, you intuitively pick up on the tone, the relationship between the speakers,
Yeah.
the overall situation.
Right.
All of that helps you grasp the subtle ways the word can be used. It becomes more than just a definition. It becomes a tool you can actually use.
It's almost like learning the personality of a word, not just its name.
Right.
That makes me think about the different contexts we encounter every day.
Sure.
The way we talk to our boss is different from how we talk to our best friend.
Exactly. And a richer vocabulary allows you to adapt to those different situations seamlessly.
Yeah.
You can tailor your word choice to fit the tone and express yourself with nuance and precision.
Right.
Whether you're writing a formal email or cracking jokes with your friends.
It's about having the right linguistic tool for every job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about consistency?
Okay.
I think we all know it's important,
Yeah.
but it's often where we fall short.
Yeah.
Does the Source podcast offer any strategies for making consistent learning less daunting?
They emphasize that even small, consistent efforts
Okay.
are far more effective than sporadic bursts of intense study.
Okay.
It's about building a habit, making vocabulary, building a natural part of your day.
So it's more about integrating it into our lives.
Right.
Rather than treating it as a separate task to check off our to-do list.
Yeah.
What kind of small steps can we take to make that happen?
The Source podcast gave some great examples. It could be as simple as setting a goal to learn one new word each day
Okay.
and then actively trying to use it in a conversation or writing it down in a journal.
Sure.
Or maybe you use your commute to listen to a podcast,
Okay.
like this one,
Right.
and jot down any unfamiliar words you hear.
Okay.
The key is to find what works for you and to make it a sustainable habit.
It's about finding those little pockets of time in your day
Right.
and transforming them into opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
Now on to the final C. Curiosity.
Okay.
I have a feeling this one's close to both our hearts.
Absolutely. Curiosity is the engine that drives all learning.
Okay.
In the context of vocabulary building, it means actively engaging with unfamiliar words.
Yeah.
Instead of skimming over them, take a moment to look them up, consider their etymology, explore their synonyms and antonyms.
So it's about going beyond just understanding the definition.
Yes.
And really digging into the richness and complexity of language.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love that. But how do we cultivate that curiosity in the first place? Does the Source podcast have any suggestions?
It's about training yourself to be more mindful of language. Pay attention to the words people use in conversations, in books, and movies.
Right.
When you encounter a word that piques your interest, don't just let it pass by.
Yeah.
Jot it down, look it up, and try to understand its nuances.
Okay.
It's almost like a treasure hunt,
Mm-hmm.
and each new word you uncover is a gem you can add to your linguistic collection.
I love that analogy. It's about approaching language with a sense of wonder and excitement,
Yeah.
rather than seeing it as a chore.
Right.
Speaking of exciting resources,
Okay.
the Source podcast mentioned a few that I'm eager to delve into.
Right.
First up, they recommended high-quality news websites.
Yeah.
Any favorites come to mind?
The beauty of publications like New York Times or The Guardian is that they cover such a broad range of topics,
Right.
whether it's politics, science, art, or culture. You're exposed to a wide variety of vocabulary used in sophisticated and nuanced ways.
It's like a one-stop shop for expanding your vocabulary.
Right.
You can read about current events,
Yeah.
learn about new scientific discoveries, or even delve into literary critiques,
Sure.
all while absorbing new words and phrases.
And the best part is it doesn't have to feel like work.
Right.
If you're genuinely interested in the topic,
Uh-huh.
the vocabulary acquisition happens naturally.
It's like sneaking in a vocabulary lesson while doing something you already enjoy.
Exactly.
Now, for those who prefer a more structured approach, the Source podcast also highlighted flashcard apps.
Apps like Anki or Quizlet leverage the power of spaced repetition,
Okay.
which we discussed earlier,
Right.
to help you memorize new words effectively.
Uh-huh.
They also allow you to create personalized decks
Okay.
based on your specific needs and interests.
It's like having a personal vocabulary trainer in your pocket.
Yeah.
But let's be honest.
Okay.
Sometimes staring at flashcards can feel a bit monotonous.
Yeah.
Are there any more engaging ways to solidify those words in our minds? The Source podcast mentioned a couple of exercises.
I'm curious to hear about them.
Okay.
What did they suggest?
They recommended word journaling
Okay.
and word association exercises.
Gotcha.
In word journaling, you write down a new word, its definition, an example sentence,
Right.
and maybe even a synonym or antonym.
Okay.
It helps solidify the word's meaning and make it more memorable.
It's a great way to actively engage with new vocabulary rather than passively reading definitions.
Right.
And the act of writing itself helps to reinforce the information in your mind.
It turns vocabulary building into a creative writing exercise,
Yeah,
which can be much more fun than rote memorization.
absolutely.
The other exercise they mentioned, word association, is all about branching out from a known word
Okay.
to explore related terms and concepts.
Yeah.
For example, if we start with the word travel,
Uh-huh.
where can we go from there?
We could explore synonyms like journey voyage
Yeah.
or expedition.
Right.
Or we could think about related words like destination itinerary or passport. We could even branch out to consider different modes of transportation.
Sure.
Plane, train, automobile,
Uh-huh.
or even bicycle.
It's like creating a spider web of words, connecting them in all sorts of interesting and unexpected ways.
Right.
And by making those connections, you're not just expanding your vocabulary,
Yeah.
but also deepening your understanding of how language works.
It's about seeing language as a living, interconnected system
Right.
rather than a collection of isolated words.
Yes.
And that understanding can make all the difference in how effectively you use language
Uh-huh.
to express yourself and connect with others.
That's a fantastic point.
Thanks.
And it makes me wonder, out of all the words we've discussed today, did any particularly resonate with you?
You know, the word serendipity really struck me.
Oh, yeah.
It perfectly captures the joy of unexpected discoveries. And I think that's a big part of what makes vocabulary building so rewarding.
Right.
You never know what linguistic gems you'll uncover along the way.
I love that. It's like embarking on a treasure hunt through the vast landscape of language.
It is.
My favorite word from the Source podcast was resilience.
Oh, nice.
It speaks to the ability to bounce back from challenges,
Yeah.
to adapt and grow stronger,
Right.
which is essential not just in language learning, but in life as a whole.
It's a powerful word, and it reminds us that vocabulary building isn't a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah,
There will be times when you feel stuck or discouraged,
absolutely.
but it's important to keep going, to keep learning, to keep pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
And to remember that every new word you learn is a step forward on your linguistic journey.
Yes.
It's a tool you can use to express yourself more clearly, to understand the world more deeply,
Right.
and to connect with others in more meaningful ways.
Yep.
I think that's a great place to leave it for part 1 of this deep dive.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll be back with you soon for part 2.
Sounds good. We were just talking about resilience. And I think that word perfectly segues into a deeper discussion about the connection
Okay.
between a rich vocabulary and the way we see the world.
It's almost like having more colors on your palette
Right.
as a painter.
That's a great analogy. Imagine trying to describe a breathtaking sunset
Okay.
with only the words red and orange.
Right.
You'd be able to convey the basic idea,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't be able to capture those subtle shades of pink, purple, and gold
Okay.
that truly make the sunset unique.
Or the emotions it evokes. A limited vocabulary can make it hard to fully grasp complex concepts
Yeah.
or to express the nuances of our own thoughts and feelings.
The Source podcast touched on this
Okay.
by discussing the impact of specific words on our
Mhm.
perception.
Okay.
For example, they talked about how learning the word somber,
Oh.
the realization that each passerby has a life as vivid and complex as your own,
Yeah.
can fundamentally shift your perspective
Yeah.
on the people around you.
It's like suddenly realizing that everyone you see on the street is the main character in their own story,
Right.
with hopes, dreams,
Yeah.
and struggles just as real and important as yours.
And that realization can lead to greater empathy and understanding.
Mm.
I remember when I first encountered the word hairoth,
Okay.
which describes a longing for a home that no longer exists,
Right.
to which you can never return.
Yeah.
It helped me articulate a feeling I had experienced,
Mm.
but never been able to put into words.
Words have the power to name and validate our experiences, even the most complex and difficult ones.
They do.
It's like having a key that unlocks a door you didn't even know existed.
I'm also fascinated by the way etymology,
Okay.
the study of word origins,
Right.
can add depth and richness to our understanding of language.
Mm.
For instance, knowing that serendipity originates from a Persian fairy tale
Okay.
about princes who made fortunate discoveries by accident
Right.
adds a whole new layer of meaning to the word.
It's not just about luck. It's about cultivating a mindset of openness and curiosity
Right.
that allows us to recognize and seize those unexpected opportunities.
And sometimes even familiar words can surprise us when we delve into their origins.
Mm.
The word disaster, for example,
Yeah.
comes from the Italian words dis, meaning bad,
Okay.
and astro, meaning star.
Mm.
So a disaster was originally attributed to an unfavorable alignment of the stars.
It makes you realize how much history and cultural meaning is embedded in the words we use every day.
It does.
But understanding etymology isn't just about trivia.
Right.
The Source podcast argued that it can actually help us remember and use words more effectively.
Absolutely.
Okay.
When you know the story behind a word,
Uh-huh.
it becomes more than just a collection of letters.
Yeah.
It becomes a living piece of history,
Mm.
a window into the evolution of language and culture. And that deeper understanding can make it easier to recall and use the word correctly.
It's like learning about the life of a historical figure. Once you know their story,
Yeah.
their name becomes more than just a label.
Right.
It represents a complex individual with motivations, experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and a lasting impact on the world.
That's a great point. And
Okay.
just as we learn about history through the lives of individuals,
Yeah.
we can learn about language through the stories of words.
Right.
But let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
We've talked about the benefits of a rich vocabulary, but the Source podcast also acknowledged
Right.
that it can be a challenge to actually put those new words into practice.
It's one thing to understand a word in isolation,
Yeah.
but quite another to wield it confidently in a conversation or in your writing.
The Source podcast emphasized that fluency comes from practice. It's about creating opportunities to use new words in real-life situations,
Right.
even if it feels a bit awkward at first.
Like anything new, it takes time and effort to build confidence.
It does.
The Force podcast suggested finding language buddies to practice with.
Oh, yeah.
People who are also interested in expanding their vocabulary and who won't judge you for making the occasional mistake.
That's a great idea. Having a supportive environment where you can experiment with new words
Yeah.
without fear of judgment
Right.
can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
The podcast also stressed the importance of reading widely
Okay.
and paying attention to the way skilled writers use language.
It's about immersing yourself in the world of words,
Right.
observing how they're used to create different effects,
Yeah.
and then trying to emulate those techniques in your own writing.
And don't be afraid to be playful with language.
Right.
The Source podcast suggested trying out word games,
Okay.
writing poetry,
Uh-huh.
or even just jotting down interesting words and phrases you encounter throughout your day.
It's about making vocabulary, building a fun and engaging process
Right.
rather than a chore.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people get hung up on the idea
Uh-huh.
that they need to memorize thousands of obscure words to be considered well-spoken.
The Source podcast debunked that myth quite effectively.
Okay.
They argued that it's much more important to have a deep understanding of
Yes.
commonly used words
Mm.
and to be able to use them with precision and nuance.
It's about quality over quantity.
Yeah,
It's better to have a small toolbox of well-maintained and versatile tools
right.
than a giant shed full of rusty and unfamiliar implements.
And just like a skilled craftsperson knows which tool to use for each specific task,
Right.
a skilled communicator knows which words to choose
Okay.
to convey their message effectively.
But even with the right tools and techniques,
Yeah,
building a rich vocabulary requires ongoing effort
it does.
and a willingness to embrace the challenges along the way.
The Source podcast reminded us that language is constantly evolving.
Right.
New words are being coined.
Yeah.
Old words are taking on new meanings. And the nuances of language are constantly shifting.
So it's not just about reaching a certain level of vocabulary
Right.
and calling it a day.
Yeah.
It's about staying curious, continuing to explore the world of words,
Mm-hmm.
and adapting to the ever-changing landscape of language.
It's about becoming a lifelong learner,
Yeah.
embracing the journey of discovery,
Right.
and recognizing that the pursuit of a richer vocabulary is an enriching and rewarding endeavor in itself.
And on that note,
Yeah.
I think it's time for a little thought-provoking prompt
Okay.
to carry with you as we transition to the final part of our deep dive.
I'm intrigued.
Okay.
What did you got for us?
Welcome back to this deep dive exploring the power of words. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty energized after that last discussion about how expanding your vocabulary can really change how you see the world.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that language isn't just about communication, but it's a powerful tool for shaping our thoughts and understanding.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love to dig into some practical strategies
Okay,
for vocabulary building.
sounds good.
We've already talked about some great resources like news websites,
Yeah,
flashcard apps,
right,
and finding language buddies.
right.
What else did the Source podcast recommend?
Well, they highlighted something called active recall,
Okay.
which involves testing yourself on new words without looking at the definitions. This forces your brain to work harder
Right.
to retrieve the information, which strengthens the memory.
So instead of just passively rereading definitions,
Right,
you're really trying to recall the word and its meaning.
exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Are there any specific techniques for doing this effectively?
One simple method is to create flashcards with the word on one side
Okay.
and the definition on the other.
Mhm.
Then try to define the word before flipping the card over to check your answer.
Gotcha.
You can also try using new words in sentences
Okay.
or creating short stories or poems that incorporate them.
It's about making the learning process more active and engaging.
Mm.
It reminds me of something else the Source podcast mentioned.
Okay.
The importance of making a personal connection with new words.
Right. They suggested techniques like visualizing the word,
Right.
creating a mental image,
Hmm.
or association that helps you remember it.
Okay.
You could also try to connect the word to a personal memory
Right.
or experience, or even to another word you already know.
It's almost like giving the word a personality or a story that makes it more memorable.
Exactly.
But sometimes,
Yeah,
even with the best strategies,
right.
it can be challenging to find the time and motivation
Yeah.
for consistent vocabulary building.
That's true.
Any tips for staying on track?
Well, the Source podcast really emphasized the importance of setting realistic goals
Okay.
and finding ways to integrate vocabulary building into your daily routine. Maybe you spend 10 minutes each morning reviewing flashcards,
Yeah.
or you listen to a vocabulary-focused podcast during your commute.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you and making it a sustainable habit.
And remembering that even small, consistent efforts
Yes.
can lead to significant progress over time.
Absolutely.
What about when you encounter a word that completely stumps you? Sometimes I feel like I'm wading through a linguistic jungle.
The Source podcast reminded us that it's okay to feel overwhelmed at times.
Okay.
The key is to not give up.
Right.
Just break down the challenge into smaller steps. Maybe you start by looking up the word's etymology to get a better understanding of its roots.
Right.
Or you try to find synonyms
Okay.
or antonyms that are more familiar to you.
It's about approaching language with a sense of curiosity
Yeah.
and a willingness to explore
Right.
rather than feeling defeated by unfamiliar terms.
Exactly.
But even beyond specific strategies, I think the most important factor
Yeah.
in successful vocabulary building is having the right mindset.
Absolutely. It's about embracing the journey, celebrating small victories, and viewing every new word you learn as an opportunity for growth.
I think that's a great point to end on. I'm a firm believer that anyone can expand their vocabulary
Me too.
with the right tools and mindset. But before we wrap up completely, is there a final piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think I would just say remember that language is a gift, a
Mm,
tool for connection, creativity,
yeah,
and self-expression.
right.
Embrace the power of words, explore their nuances,
Mm.
and never stop being curious about the world they reveal.
That's a beautiful way to wrap things up. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to embark on your own vocabulary building adventure. Now, thanks for joining us.